Hi everybody and welcome to a Heel Heat Top 10 review. My name is George Coles. This is my tag team partner, Chris Canyon.
Who better than Canyon? Everybody. Gary Rhodes, everybody.
And the topic of this week's Top 10 is a controversial one. In our opinion, the top 10 most overrated wrestlers. And I'll go ahead and let you start it off, Gary.
Well, first off, we're going to start off at number 10. This is a guy kind of before our times. Haystacks Calhoun.
Yes.
Now, Haystacks was billed as this unstoppable force, unmovable object kind of character, but actually he was just a non-moving object.
Exactly. And the reason why he makes our list, Haystacks Calhoun was billed as the king of the battle royals, a guy that can't be beat, can't be thrown out of the battle royals. Myself and Gary come from the era where we got our information from magazines like Pro Wrestling Illustrated, The Wrestler, and you would read up in this guy. You'd read up about Haystacks Calhoun and how he hasn't lost a battle royal in 10 years, how he hasn't been pinned in 10 years. All this crap you would read about him, and you would think he was Andre the Giant.
And he was.
Then when you finally see him, you're like, really, this is it? This is the guy? And like he said, he wasn't unmovable. He just couldn't move.
Exactly. I mean, you take a guy like Yokozuna. Yokozuna is probably on a lot of our overachievers lists.
Yes.
And he was bigger than Haystacks.
Exactly.
And the dude was a fucking WWE champion twice.
Deservingly.
Exactly. And a tag team champion with Owen Hart. Probably one of the best tag teams thrown together, I would say, would be them.
Yes.
But then you have Haystacks, he just stands there. Don't touch me. Don't touch me. Not knocking a guy. I mean, he was top.
He drew a lot of money. In our opinion, he's overrated. And the next guy, he's not so high on Gary's list, but he's very high on my list. If this was just George Coles' list, this son of a bitch would be number 1. Number 9, Mike Awesome. The biggest piece of shit in the history of wrestling.
Why is that, George?
Well, that son of a bitch. All you fans, you know that I'm very partial to the original ECW. I grew up just outside of Philadelphia. Love ECW. It is the thing I love most in the history of wrestling. And that piece of shit did more than anybody else to drag ECW down. He tried to take the ECW title and throw it away on Monday Nitro. I just think, honestly, in my opinion, he's the biggest piece of shit. He tried to kill a promotion that was building up nothing but young guys, young talent, and giving older guys their last run in the business, and he tried to help kill it.
Mm-hmm. I can't disagree with the facts. I did like a lot of his in-ring work. You can't really take a lot of that away from the guy. Him and Tanaka really put on some great matches.
What did Mike Awesome do that King can't?
Oh, I'm not saying that. It's kind of like with the Haystacks and Yokozuna thing. Yep. I mean, Kane's 10 times the guy Mike Awesome was. I'm not doubting that, but he did do a lot of damage to wrestling, and he
got pushes he didn't deserve.
Exactly.
And that's why he makes this list. And he also makes the list of my number 1 fuck you guy in the history of wrestling.
All right. With that being said, we're going to go to number 8. Another former ECW champion, the revamped ECW, Bobby Lashley. Bobby Lashley came in with all this hype. And don't get me wrong, he had a great build.
He was a tremendous amateur wrestler, too.
Exactly. But that doesn't make you Kurt Angle. You get what I'm saying? There's a lot of guys that, what was it, Sylvester Terkay, not a Kurt Angle. You got a lot of guys that come into the business and get a push that really don't deserve it, and Bobby is definitely one of those.
And what was it, WrestleMania?
Not a great talker.
WrestleMania 23 that he was one of the focal points. Umaga stole the show, in my opinion, in the match, and Bobby Lashley was very average. Bobby Lashley, for all the pushes he got, was very average.
Oh, yes. I mean, he was a little below average in his interview skills, too.
The only thing that Bobby Lashley had going for him, and it's a recurring theme throughout the show, I would say, is his look.
Oh, exactly.
He looked intimidating, but nothing he did was intimidating.
No. And there's a few others, like you said, they're coming right down. We got a few more.
Yeah, it's the same point we had about Haystacks, really.
Yeah.
Just different builds. Now, coming off of that, our number 6 guy is a guy that, like Bobby Lashley, was a legitimate, or I'm sorry, number 7. I'm sorry, guys. Was a guy just like Bobby Lashley who in the real world was a legitimate badass and got tremendous pushes based off his real world talent. However, it didn't transfer into the wrestling talent, and that's Ken Shamrock.
Totally agree.
The guy, in my opinion, he gave awkward promos that seemed forced. His in-ring ability never, in my opinion, never fully developed. He seemed to stay at one level of development and never improve.
I think a lot of it had to do with his attitude. He had the attitude like he wasn't Austin or he was Shawn Michaels.
Yes.
He was not in their league,
No,
by far.
was.
He wasn't total waste, but a lot of the thing is, you have a guy that has a decent amount of talent and has a bad attitude about things that doesn't want to progress, they're overrated. Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. And he was one of the guys that TNA pushed early in their show. As a matter of fact, he was their first champion. And he's a guy that Vince gave a couple pushes that he probably didn't deserve.
Yep. That being said, speaking of pushes that are not deserved, number 6, Ahmed Johnson. Yes, you knew he was coming up on this list. If you've been watching wrestling, you know it. One of the guys that just, they had an unbelievable build. He looked like a legitimate monster.
Former Dallas Cowboy.
Exactly. And, well, a cocaine cowboy pretty much. Because that a lot of his personal demons really interfered with it and his attitude.
Yeah. And that was the thing of it. Ahmed Johnson cut some of the worst promos in the history of wrestling, had some of the worst matches in the history of wrestling. Again, another guy like Bobby Lashley and Haystacks Calhoun that got over just on his look.
Yeah. Well, I remember when he went to WCW.
As Big T.
As Big T, and he got over on Booker T. I'm thinking to myself now, how pissed off are you if you're Booker T and Ahmed Johnson or Big T, whatever you want to call him, is getting over on you, which guy you can out-wrestle any day. And even back then, Booker T was...
Hell, Stevie Ray could out wrestle.
Yeah,
and Stevie Ray wasn't the wrestler in Harlem Heat.
No, he was their power man. But I mean, that's just people that get pushes that don't deserve it just by their looks.
And speaking of pushes you don't deserve, our number 5 guy makes it on this list because he was a guy that was so entrenched in the booking that he gave himself multiple world championships, and that's Jeff Jarrett.
Yeah.
Jeff Jarrett, he's a decent in-ring performer, not knocking the guy's talent. He's got really good talent. He was a great mid-card wrestler in both WWF and WCW. He was too much of a Russo guy at the end of WCW, and most of this is because what he did in TNA and putting the belt on himself so many times and putting himself as a focal point.
But do you think it was more like the Vern Gagne syndrome where he's the only guy to count on, or was it just his ego?
I think it was his ego because remember the incident where he had the Good Housekeeping match with China and he held up Vince for another $100,000 or whatever. I don't remember what the money was.
Yeah.
But his contract was up. He was going to WCW, and he said, Vince, if you don't give me X amount of money, I'm not going to drop the Intercontinental title on this pay-per-view. I'm not even going to go out there because I don't have a contract.
Well, another thing is, I mean, a good point about him is I was watching an interview with Shawn Michaels a while back, and actually Jeff, when he was coming up, was one of his favorite opponents because Jeff could handle the bumps and stuff like that Shawn would deliver.
Well, I'm not knocking the guy's in-ring talent.
Well, I'm just saying, but he says as I've gotten better, then it became more like guys like Bret Hart and more of these other more better guys. But Jeff was a good guy to train to work your way up. He was like his Jannetty. That's what I was getting to.
Yeah.
Number 4 on our list was actually a member of the Four Horsemen, undeservingly, just by his look.
It's kind of weird how that works out. Usually number 4
I know,
is a Four Horsemen guy.
I know, right? Usually it's for something good. For this, it's not. Lex Luger. Luger got thrown in there because he had a great build, and basically his only attribute was a great build.
And that's the theme of the theme of this whole list so far. Is most of these guys got over on their looks. Lex Luger, again, he was a Penn State football player. I think he played in the USWA. He had a little bit of professional football. Canadian football. One of those minor leagues.
Well, here's a question for you.
He was a tremendous player at Penn State.
Name me a legendary Lex Luger match.
No.
Exactly.
The man, his biggest thing was slamming Yokozuna on the battleship.
Yeah. And Ahmed Johnson did it too, and he's on this list too.
There you go.
You know, Luger he never had that star quality. He just had the look. WCW tried to make him to be or NWA, I'm sorry, back then, tried to make him to be their Hulk Hogan.
Yes.
But he was sans charisma and had a little bit more hair.
I forget who it was that said it. I think it was on one of the Legends of Wrestlings that WWE put out. But they said about Luger, it was the Heat Seekers one.
Yeah.
They said about Luger is he's a guy that never loved wrestling and just seen the dollars. And you could see in the way he worked that all he cared about was money. He didn't care about the show.
I seen that he's on an episode of one of those pawn shows.
I seen that he was. I didn't watch it.
I've seen the scene, and he pawned some of his stuff for charity. Now he does give a lot to charity and stuff now.
Oh.
Apparently, after he killed Elizabeth, he has a guilty conscience. I'm just kidding. I don't know what the whole deal was, but yeah. I mean, he's a money guy. That's all he's ever been.
Yep.
I mean, he held Vince up. Well, technically, until he just kind of got his chance to go to work for WCW.
Exactly.
You know.
And you know, another thing that's reoccurring on the list is guys that screwed over a promotion. Him, Mike Awesome, Jeff Jarrett. These guys have all screwed over a promotion. And our next guy, number 3, has screwed over the WWE/WWF several times. And that's the Ultimate Warrior.
Oh, you count WCW in there too, I'm sure.
Well, I don't know that he made bad booking. I think he did the six dates he promised he would there. And he lived up to his contract, which they paid him tremendous amounts. It's his fault that the British Bulldog's dead in a roundabout way because of the trap door was what he hurt his back on, became addicted to pills, which ended his life. So, roundabout way, it's the Ultimate Warrior's fault, at least in my opinion. The guy cut nonsense promos. I don't know, do you watch Are You Serious, the Road Dogg and Josh Matthews show?
Me.
Today they did the newest one that came out this morning. They showed a non-smoking thing that Warrior did, and he's crushing his cigarettes looking like he's trying to eat them. Makes no goddamn sense what he's talking about. It has nothing to do with anything, but somehow it's anti-smoking.
Watch the self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior, and there's a scene where they're kind of knocking all his interviews, and Christian Cage, whatever you want to call him, does the best Ultimate Warrior impersonation I've ever seen. I mean, it's one of the things, like, sometimes if I get bored, I'll YouTube it at work, just to see it, because it's hilarious. But I mean, really, he's kind of like with Lex Luger. But the thing is, he has 2 great matches under his belt. I will give him that. The match against Hogan, which wasn't skill-wise, it was just, it was the epic match.
Kind of like the Andre Hogan match.
Exactly, but and then it was him and Savage the next WrestleMania,
which is by far his best match.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're working with.
That was 7. That was WrestleMania 7.
7 was that one. 6 was Hogan. Yeah. And I mean, the WrestleMania 7 and that was actually probably one of the best WrestleMania matches. But yeah,
he was a guy that was pushed off his look again. And
speaking of look, we're going to number 2, John Cena. You knew he was going to come on this list. I mean, the guy does put some asses in the seats, but his ability, it just gets boring to watch. The 6-hit combo of queer is that trademarked, right?
There you go.
Oh, shit.
Shout out to Lou.
But, I mean, honestly, you look for those moves. The only matches I like watching him in anymore is when he's against Punk, because Punk will reverse all 6 moves just to be a dick. It was the first pay-per-view they did against each other. Not the very first, but this little series they had going on now was the first one. Every time Cena went for one of his moves, boom, reversed every time.
And Cena does put on good matches here and there, but they're so few and far between. He's so limited. His interviews, his promos are mailed in most of the time. I thought the Doctor of Thugonomics, when Cena was first coming up, I was a big fan of what he was doing because it was so different. And then it's like they took that and watered it down to its basic common denominator.
See, if they went to the Attitude Era, or whatever they're going to call it now, what do you think they're going to call it?
The Revolution.
The Revolution. I would make trademarked. Make John Cena heel and have the Thugonomics character come back. It would work with the idea, I think, and he'd still be one of the top guys.
Yeah.
Just think it over. I mean, really, look at some of the interviews he did, and then put that with something like they got going on now. I think he'd work wonders.
Now, before we go on to our number 1 guy on the list, if you've watched our top 10s, we always give you a best of the rest. Basically, these are the guys that didn't make this list, but they're just barely didn't make it. And these are in no particular order. The first guy is Sheamus. Now, I'm going to precursor that with when we originally wrote this list, Sheamus was on it. But then we rethought with the work that Sheamus has done this year, which we've been really impressed with, he's taken him off the list, but still, that's 1 year out of, 6 years he's been on TV now? Mm-hmm. 1 out of 6 that he's put out a good year. So he continues to improve. We do this list again 5-10 years down the road, he might not even be in the best of the rest.
No. Next guy, and we're probably going to catch a lot of heat out of this, would be Tito Santana. Tito Santana was plain overrated. He was the generic version of Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
Not the generic luchador like El Generico.
No. But, really, he was the all-time baby face up north.
Yeah.
And Steamboat was the all-time baby face down south.
I agree with that.
And then if you really look at it, when Ricky came up to work for WWE, where'd Tito go?
Exactly. He became the Matador.
Arriba!
And then our next guy was...
Speaking of Matadors...
was a guy who got pushes all over everywhere he went, and he is another guy like Jeff Jarrett that had a booking, so he booked himself as champion. And that was Conan. I was never impressed with Conan's ring talent. His mic skills were great.
Oh, yeah.
His ring talent was terrible, in my opinion. And he held up Vince with the Max Moon thing.
Oh, yeah.
Again, there's certain levels of stuff that people do that put him on this list.
Well, next guy here, Buff Bagwell. Just another guy that, he never really had that A-quality match or even a B-quality match. He just solely by look. The guy had $1 million body.
Just ask Chipper.
Ooh, girlfriend. But, really, I don't know if that's true, do you? I don't know. He was an Atlanta Brave. But, just to say it, he just never really had the whole package or total package.
I bet you Chipper had the whole package.
In his mouth.
Anyway. Now, after that, if you guys have any opinions, you think we put someone here that doesn't deserve, or
number one, or
well, yeah.
Oh, okay.
We're building it up to number one.
Sorry.
That doesn't deserve to be on here, or you think there's someone we missed. Let us know. Hit us up in our comments. Put it on our Facebook, our Twitter. Put it down where?
Down there. Hold on, wait for it. Pow! Speak of Chipper Jones.
It's terrible.
It's terrible.
Now, the number one most overrated wrestler, in our opinion, you knew he was coming up. He fits all the criteria we've been talking about through the whole show. Bill Goldberg.
Not Bill Goldberg. Exactly.
The guy, again, he's a guy that doesn't care about wrestling, and it shows. He's a guy that got over because of his look. He's a guy that couldn't cut a promo worth a damn. And he's a guy that tried to hold up promoters for more money. He fits everything that makes you overrated.
Exactly. None of his matches, that's why he had the short squash matches, everybody.
Yeah.
Is because he didn't have the skill to make a long match.
There is one memorable Goldberg match, though.
What's that?
Goldberg versus William Regal.
Oh, yeah. Well, that lasted, but I'm sure Goldberg didn't want it to last.
Yeah.
Why don't you explain it to him real quick? We got a few minutes.
Well, the Goldberg versus Steven Regal at the time, he was while Goldberg was going through his streak, they put him out there with Steven Regal, and Steven Regal just decided he wasn't going to play nice with him, and for about 5-6 minutes,
just fucked him up.
Just was tossing him around the ring and showing him what a real, actual wrestler could do, and led to Steven Regal getting fired, but it's one of the best matches, in my opinion.
That's where the man's man gimmick came from with Regal. There's another incident that wasn't a match with Chris Jericho.
Jericho lit him up.
Jericho put him in it was a front chin lock in the locker room.
And just left him.
Just laying him out with it. Because, Goldberg's twice his size. He just grabbed a hold of him. You figure Goldberg's as big as he is, as bad as he is.
Well, Chris Jericho trained in the dungeon.
That's where a lot of people don't get. Chris Jericho is probably one of the most legit tough guys there is. Don't let the Y2J character fool you.
Well, think about it.
He trained with Stu Hart.
Stu wasn't a big guy. What was he, 5'8"?
But he was a broad guy, though. If you see a lot of his pictures, he was broad as shit.
I'm just saying, though, Stu wasn't big, but Stu could take down anybody. Stu took down Andre the Giant. Mm-hmm. And, then we're getting off subject a little bit here. But Goldberg, in my opinion, he's the most overrated guy. I never bought into the Goldberg build. I never bought into him as a main event wrestler. I had no interest in anything Goldberg did. Funny story, since we're going off the topic. When I first moved to Florida, it was in it was before, what was it?
99, 98?
98, I think, was Starrcade, where they were building to the match with Goldberg versus Nash.
2099.
99, okay. Which was the first time Goldberg lost. And my first job here, I was talking to a guy that liked wrestling, and we were talking about wrestling. And in my mind, I assume that most fans are smart. They know the business, and you guys know what smart means. And I was saying, you know, they built Goldberg in a way that it has to be somebody big, somebody giant like Nash. Nash is the only... He's already... At that point, he had already beat the Giant, Big Show, a couple times. Nash was the only one, in my mind, as a wrestling fan, it made sense to beat him. He's like, oh, no one's ever going to beat Goldberg. And to me, that was the first time I ever experienced a grown adult being such a mark that they didn't realize that, you know, you could put anybody out there. If they wanted to, Rey Mysterio would have beat Goldberg.
Exactly. But I mean, I just never really bought into the character either. I just thought it was cheesy as shit. And I don't know why even Vince picked it up. I guess it's money, so.
Vince picked him up for money.
Yeah. But anyways, I mean, is there anything else you want to throw?
No, that's pretty much I had.
I think we ripped on everybody so far, so. If you know, like I said, if you have any disagreements with our list, just let us know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's basically all we got to say. My name is George Coles.
I'm Gary Rhodes.
This has been another Heel Heat review.